welcome to the Icebreaker for Paul Tyson's episode. If you are listening to this on your podcast app, at the end of this Icebreaker episode, it will roll straight into the next episode in your playlist for this podcast, which will be the full podcast with Paul. So I suggest you hang on at the end and roll into the next episode. It is going to be a good one. The questions that we're going to be going through in the Icebreaker have been submitted by Platinum patrons. They're being submitted ahead of this episode. They got early warning of the guest and the start time, and they are watching this episode live right now and submitting questions live right now in the chat. So if you want an opportunity in future for future guests, think about becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/HK podcast. In fact, don't try and remember that. Just look in the blurb of this episode and the links are in there. Anyway, on to the guest. Paul Tyson, welcome to the H Hour.
It's quite unusual to have mics pointing at me rather than away from me.
I can imagine. Do you mind being that side of the mic that you're on now?
I don't. I've never done it before. Ask me in a couple of hours.
No way. Really?
Yeah, no, I've never been. I mean, I have been on telly wandering through the shot or kind of shouting at people from the back of cars and
You've never been interviewed?
No, the only time I've ever been interviewed is in the army when the Princess of Wales, Princess Diana, came to visit my regiment, and I got pinged as a unit press officer because nobody else wanted to do it. So I think I got interviewed by BBC Kent and Meridian and such like with my number twos on, and that was a basic soundbite. How we're very honoured.
Yeah,
and that was it. Hopefully that no longer exists.
Well, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I mean, when we were chatting when I came over to the office, chatting away, it'd be fine. It's exactly the same thing, exactly the same kind of chat, except with more questions, and it's been recorded and live streamed. No pressure.
That's fine.
All right, let's get on to the questions from the patrons. I apologise in advance. Some of these are difficult, I think. Difficult, challenging questions, I think. Challenging questions, if I can find the goddamn thing. Where is it? Where are they? Bear with me. I did have them up, and now they've disappeared. Oh, yeah, loads of them. Loads of them. Got to post. Come on. Sorry, Coke, while you're waiting. There we go. Okay, got him. All right. Question number 1 from Coke. What do you think of BBC reports of UK Special Forces murdering civilians, including children?
That's a nice, easy one to start. In truth, I've not watched the panoramas, so I've only seen the BBC News reporting. Obviously, it's Panorama that's I think is the platform that's been sort of leading on that story. Yeah, I mean, it's journalism. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to think of it, really. It's not something I've sort of followed very closely. I mean, I suppose I'm not sure what the question invites me to think about it, really. It's a story I'm aware of, but it's not one I've followed in any detail. Yeah, so it's hard to comment on. I mean, if what you're asking is whether the BBC should be allowed to report on such things, if that's where the question's going, then 100% categorically yes. It's that's why we have a free press. Yeah. And occasionally it will be the case that a free press will report on things that may make you uncomfortable. That may be that you feel that the allegations are wrong, but and they may well prove to be over the course of time. Who knows? But whether they should be reporting on it, I mean, it's kind of it's their job, and B, it's their duty as a public service broadcaster. So if that's kind of where that question was going, then I would 100% be in favour of the BBC or any journalistic organisations doing journalism. That doesn't necessarily mean that quite often these allegations don't turn out in the long course to be true or turn out to be different from the start. You'll remember the Al-Swady inquiry, I think, and stuff like that. So sometimes stories move and change and evolve and grow as more knowledge becomes available. But 100% support the BBC's right to do that kind of journalism. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Question 2 from Coke again. How would you? Oh, okay. It's related. How would you and ITV is saying here. How would you and ITV have done a report on this? How would you have done a report on this in comparison to what the BBC did? Would you do anything different?
I can't really answer that.
No,
I mean, I
yeah,
haven't
no,
watched the panoramas, so it's not really, wouldn't be right for me to answer
Fine.
that for two reasons. One is that I'm not not a spokesman or an avatar for ITV. I'm here in a personal capacity. Obviously, I get that I represent ITV by virtue of the fact I work it there. But secondly, it's hypothetical, and thirdly, I haven't watched the panoramas, so it's not something I could reasonably
Yeah, I've not seen it either, actually.
reasonably answer. To be honest, I'm
Fine.
not trying to be evasive, but I don't think that's a question that I could be helpful with.
Okay, moving on to still difficult questions. Generally, can mainstream UK media be trusted to report the truth? I promise you, I didn't write this question.
That's not. I mean, that's. I don't think that's not a difficult question at all. I mean, the answer to that is yes, 100%. So I think there are some things. It helps to be.
I need you on that mic. If you can come and let.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
Where to start? It's a very broad question. In terms of can they be trusted to the truth? Yes. I don't think anybody joins the media or becomes a journalist because they have this great lie in mind that they want to inflict upon the public. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Exactly what is the truth is a variable somewhat, and it's difficult to not everyone would agree on where the truth lies and what the truth is. So it's, any answer to that's going to be slightly subjective. But in terms of whether, and I don't like the term mainstream media, I'm not sure what that means. Where does that start and end? It's normally when I see that term, it's normally politically loaded and normally means this is the media you can't trust. We want you to look at this media that you can. What's mainstream? How do you measure it? By viewing figures or readership or by reach or by what does it mean? Is the Morning Star
I describe
mainstream?
mainstream media as the traditional
Legacy media, what we would call legacy
traditional
media.
platforms. Yeah,
So,
I don't want to say legacy because they're still very much around now, right? But yeah, legacy, traditional platforms. So newspapers, news outlets, whose job it is to do news, BBC, ITV. Oh, well, ITV do other things but news, but those traditional platforms.
yeah,
deliver
okay,
mainstream
understood.
media.
So,
and I'd also actually include like daytime TV chat shows as well, which do current event commentary.
okay,
So the same platforms.
There's a kind of important distinction between commentary and news for starters. So I think it helps to answer that question, it helps to have a little bit of media literacy. If you read, let's say, whichever daily newspapers have political opinions, they have a political slant. That, everybody knows that. They don't hide that. They're commercial products, and if that doesn't suit you, you don't buy the product, presumably. So, can they be trusted to tell the truth? Yes. Will they have political commentary that supports their, that supports their sort of worldview? Yes. Will that politics bleed into story selection, story prominence, stuff like that? Probably yes. In most, if not all cases, that's not really a surprise to anyone. And I think if you find that problematic, you could read 2 papers or 3, and amalgamate what you learn from all of them. In fact, I think it's really good practice generally when you're talking about the media to absorb as much of it as you can, not just legacy media, but what's online, what's on Twitter or X, what's on various different platforms. The more you read, the more able you are to sort of to find to read between the lines, if you like, and to find what is likely to be the case. But I mean, broadly, yes. Of course, we try and tell the truth. We try and do as much eyewitness reporting as we can. I.e., we go somewhere, we see something, we report it. We try to sort of faithfully reflect what we believe are the most important or consequential or interesting things for our audience on any given day. And I would say that every newspaper probably tries to do that, and all broadcasters try to do that. The difference between the sort of broadcast BBC and all the broadcasters are that we're regulated in a way that newspapers aren't. So there's a higher bar in terms of what we do for fairness, balance, fact checking, accuracy, and all those things. So there is a fairly substantial difference between, let's say, the BBC and let's say the Daily Mail. Obviously, but that doesn't go to whether either organisation can be trusted to tell the truth. That goes to how that is presented politically and how that's presented in other ways.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I want you to freeze exactly where you are. Now you've moved now. Stay there. Right. Put you on that mic. You keep moving into a comfy position and away from the mic, so we're going to move.
Sorry.
No, it's totally not. That's going to go there. You can do what you want. The mic's going to be...
Excellent. Righto. Sorry, I need one of those like Madonna mics or something that I can't escape.
No, it's fine. All right, okay, cool. I totally agree with you. By the way, yes, absorb. You should take on as much as you can, as much from as many sources as you can, practically speaking, or at the very minimum. And I think you should ensure that you are getting, you are not just relying on one source.
Totally.
Totally.
You can end up in an echo chamber, particularly like online. You get this kind of, you pick what you follow, so you kind of choose those things that align with your own worldview, and then you just get it bounced back to you. And actually, I think the media is far more useful, far more valuable. This is a personal point of view. I'm not speaking as a representative of anyone. My personal view is that, challenge yourself a bit. Read a newspaper that doesn't align with your politics. The same for podcasts, same for new media. The more you're exposed to, the more ideas you're exposed to, the more you have to think for yourself, the more useful the media is to you. I would say that's sort of the way I personally try and approach it.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Okay. Are certain types of news sources better than others? For example, independent journalists on YouTube compared to TV news channels?
I mean, are some news sources better than others? Yes. I mean, unquestionably, that's true. You mean the sources that we use, or you mean news platforms that consumer would use?
Consumer.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, some are more credible than others. Some are better resourced than others. Some have a history of doing inquiring, challenging journalism. Others less so. But that's I think that's fairly plain, and I think you can kind of work that out for yourself.
Yeah.
People can make their own opinions and take their own views, but ultimately, does someone have a track record of inquiring journalism that is fact-based, that is fact-checked, that is verified, that is, what goes into that, how much work goes into that, and and the legacy media is obviously has a very long history of that. And I'm not suggesting, for instance, that they get everything right all the time. There are problems in the mainstream. You would call it mainstream media. The problems that we have to deal with.
What do you call it?
I would call it legacy media. I think if you're talking about newspapers and broadcasters like the BBC, ITN, I think I would call that the legacy media, because I think mainstream's just slightly misleading, because it sort of suggests that, where do you? I just don't understand where you start and get off. Firstly, it suggests that they're all the same, that they all have something in common, which isn't really the case. The Morning Star, is that mainstream or not? I'm not sure. It's been around a long time.
The Morning Star.
Yeah, newspaper, Communist Party, readership of about 20 people, but it's a newspaper that's been in publication for many years. Is that mainstream or not? I don't know where you stop or start with that, and I don't know how you lump together the BBC with the Daily Telegraph. They're just totally different organisations. But I think legacy media, if you want a broad term, is probably one I would prefer.
Got it. All right. This one is straight out of left field. Okay. Does it feel, this is from Coke again. Coke.
He's busy.
He throws in some absolute, you go, Jesus. Okay, but here's the question. Does it feel hard? I apologise in advance here, Paul. Does it feel hard being an older white man in a diversity-conscious climate?
Right, that's not actually that hard. I would say that actually the opposite is probably true. So there has been a lot of change in the media over the time I've been in it. Certainly. So there was a time when I would say, when I started in newspapers, I would say there were certainly people at newspapers in senior positions who were straight up racist. I mean, it was like open and blatant. People would ask questions to, like, if there were a crime, for instance, there would be questions. The first question you'd be asked is kind of, what was their name? Where did they live? Questions designed to work out essentially what colour the perpetrator was, what colour the victim was. Yeah, for instance, or if there was a tragic sort of, somebody burned themselves to death or their family in a vehicle, well, what colour are they? That's what people wanted to know, and that would how they would define stories like that. So it was just straight up racist in some areas of the tabloid press. Some areas that's going back 30 years, more than 30 years.
I don't think it's racist to make that inquiry. I think it becomes racist if you use that information.
The inquiry is there for a reason. The inquiry is there for a reason to decide whether, because black perpetrator, white victim had more value at that time than the opposite in news terms for certain outlets. So
attention value, you mean?
Yeah. So I think the media's come a long way from those days. Homophobic headlines, normal, completely normal. Sexism was like, absolutely just de rigueur, particularly in the tabloids. So where we are now, is better than where it was. The diversity consciousness in the media generally now is far preferable to where it was. I know people quite like to wind the clock back sometimes to a golden era that existed only for them, if at all. But
I think the question here, what is actually being asked, and Coke may correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I won't know until later on. I think the question that's being asked is, do you feel, as an older white man in today's diversity conscious climate, do you feel disadvantaged because of your age and your skin colour?
No.
I think that's the question he's asking.
No, I don't. I think I would argue I've probably been advantaged by being able to enter the industry in a time when being a white male was a positive.
But now?
Well, now I'm in it, so I've already gained. I've gained the positives. I'm not in a kind of career arc where I'm sort of competing with people. I compete with people for stories, but I'm not competing to be promoted or given more money or whatever. So speaking purely from a personal point of view, I don't feel disadvantaged. There may well be, early career people who do feel that. I don't feel that. I don't think that. I would hope that everyone is looked at equally and that everyone's looked at the same. And I certainly no evidence in my organisation or any that I know of that it's like that there's that the question that is supposing that there's a kind of advantage to not being white or not being male in career terms. I don't think that's the case. And I'll give you an example. For instance, I've been in the media for about 30 years. I've never had a black boss, not once, not a single one.
You never had a
black boss?
Oh,
I've never had a boss who has been a person of colour, not once.
What do you think about that?
In 5 or 6 different organisations.
For that?
Well, if you're suggesting that the world's gone, that diversity is an advantage, well, it's obviously not working as fast as perhaps it should be, because I've had plenty of women bosses. Most of my bosses have been white men, the vast majority over my career. I've had quite a few women people who've been my line manager over 30 years. That's not new. But never, there are very, very few black or people of ethnic minorities in the management structures of the media generally. There's just very few of them. So this kind of perception that the kind of media's gone diversity crazy is just not right. It's not true. The facts don't support that.
But that's not. But the fact that you haven't had a black boss, or there aren't a lot of black people in the industry, isn't an indication that the diversity isn't good, because white people represent the majority of the UK, and black people are in the minority.
But I mean, disproportionately, I've had enough. There are disproportionately fewer black people in management in the media generally. Certainly in and that's changing. That is evolving. That is changing. But that's been true for as long as I've been in the media. My first newsroom I walked into was all white. And it stayed all white. I won't say what that newsroom was. And I, went to school in a London where that wasn't the case. So it was kind of striking to me. And I was in a regiment where that wasn't the case. There were a lot of sort of ethnic diversity in my regiment, particularly for the time in the 1980s and early 90s. So it's quite striking when I came into journalism, actually, just how overwhelmingly white it was, given that most newsrooms are in London, of all places. So yeah, no, I don't. There's never been a problem for me. I've never felt disadvantaged by being a white man. No, being a white man has very much been a positive in terms of, you know, I would say I've been like privileged in terms of my career for that helped me get into the industry. And I don't think that's right, but I think it's absolutely true. And I'd say that
but I don't
the other
see
thing
it as
I would
being
say,
wrong,
the one
Paul.
thing I would say that where I think there is a point is I think we're quite an age. I think there aren't that many older people, men and women, in the industry. I think again that's an area that's probably improving.
Mm-hmm.
But there used to be a time where particularly older women, newsreaders, for instance, you know, 50 was your, you know, they'd be moved on at a certain age, and I think that's changed now. That is changing now, and I think that's positive. So, but I think age is probably an area where if you looked at per proportion of population, I would say that the media is probably quite behind. I think we're generally a young industry.
Mm-hmm.
Most newsrooms are kind of, when you look around most newsrooms that I've been in, they're kind of quite obviously young. So there's perhaps a bit of a point there, but you know, the other points, yeah, I don't agree with the sentiment behind the question.
Okay. Right. Icebreaker done. We're going to pause. We're going to pause here for 5. We'll refill our coffees. Quick conflab for the next one. And we will, right, we'll be back at 11:45-ish. Coke. So he is watching live now and he's chuckling at our discussion there. It's reminding him of a recent episode I did with someone else, and we were talking about racism. It got heated. It got heated for about half an hour.
It's an emotive subject, but I think there's a thing about politics now, isn't there? That everything has to be kind of everything has to be immediate. B, everything has to be black and white, and C, everything's really shouty now. That didn't used to be the case. So, you know, I see loads of stuff on sort of political discussions online and so on. Veterans are kind of quite bad at it, I think, generally as a community, where everyone's a traitor if they don't agree with you. It's like,
yeah.
And at the same time, we want freedom of expression. So we talk about freedom of speech, and then somebody says something we don't agree with, and they're a traitor.
Yeah.
It's like, when did that start?
Yeah.
And who does that serve, and how does that help? That's just that. There's that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is more emotional, and I think that's partly to do with social media, because emotion is it's driven by emotion, isn't it? Anger.
Yeah, and I want to come on to that subject
and all that sort of stuff.
We're going to pause. Right, back. So back in about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, Coke. See you shortly.